As an application developer,
an administrator,
we define and configure the entities needed to deploy an application with CDA.
This video guides you through the process of deploying an application packed in an MSI file to an environment.
In this video, you will learn to create entities, configure workflows and deploy an application to a test environment.
As an administrator, I have installed two packs, MSI and File System. The packs contain actions that the application developer will use to configure the deployment workflow later.
First, I will create an application, a component and a deployment workflow.
Then I will create a login object, and the endpoints, one deployment target, and one test environment.
Finally, I will create the deployment profile, to link the application and the environment, and the deployment package, to create a version of the application. First, I will create an application, a component, and a deployment workflow, which is a workflow of type install. Alternatively, you can create the entities with the application wizard. After creating an application entity in CDA, I have to define the path to the directory where my real application is stored. To do so, I create a new dynamic property of type expression in the MSI installation application. First, I need to add the component workflow to the deployment workflow. I will now add actions to the MSI component workflow. Actions are predefined tasks for executing single operations. I will link them and then define variables in the Prompt Set tab. If not available, click Properties next to Objects. In the File Create Directory action, I will add the directory name that will be used to create the directory. In the action file copy, I'll add the path to the remote directory to be downloaded, and the path to the directory on the staging server. In the MSI install action, I'll add the package name, and the path to the package. Now, I am going to create and edit existing dynamic properties for the MSI install component. First, I am going to create a new dynamic property to define the package name. This value will be referenced in the workflow by the MSI install action. Then, I am going to edit the following dynamic properties, source files DIRs. Here, I will set the name of the local directory where the MSI file is stored. Working files DIRs, to set the directory on the staging server after it has been downloaded from the source. Working base DIRs. Here I will define the base directory on the staging server where the package should be downloaded. See an example of evaluated values. Check the documentation for details.
Now it's my turn. First, I will create a login object. Login objects collect user credentials that are required to configure deployment targets. Next, I will define the credentials for the login object. I need to create one entry for each agent. Now it's time for the endpoints. I will create one environment and one deployment target to deploy the component. When creating the deployment target, I need to select the proper agent. That is, the program that allows the processing of various operation steps in a target system. I have already defined the credentials to use the agents in the login object. After creating the deployment target, I will define a staging directory in the Custom Properties section. Here, all the files needed for the deployment to the test environment will be assembled.
It's me again. There are only two more steps left. First, I will create a profile. Profiles are used to link applications and environments. To configure it, I'll use the login object, created by the administrator. Then, I'm going to pack everything in a deployment package. I use it to define an instance of the application. It is recommended to start with 1.0.
This is an overview of what we have done so far.
I have created an application, which contains one component. I have also created a version of this application, and a workflow to execute the deployment.
I have created one environment, which contains a deployment target, and I have defined one login object to store the user credentials to connect to the deployment target.
And I have defined that the component will be deployed to the deployment target in the profile. We have set everything up. Now, I can execute the workflow. Our MSI application is going to be deployed in 3, 2, 1.